we are going to move on to requirements lifecycle management.
Okay.
I'll call it RLCM because it's a very long
Yeah.
uh, kind
Right.
of phrase. I have to repeat it. So RLCM. All right. So what is RLCM? So RLCM is actually more about tracing the requirements, and if there are changes required to the requirements, then you need to assess those changes. You need to maintain those requirements. You need to get approved, and then you also need to get them prioritized. So all this happens in RLMC. So how do you do that? You have some information available to you. Until the time it reaches to requirements, it has gone through multiple processes wherein you are taking notes, you are confirming about those notes, you're creating documents, and you are storing it in folders, and then you're giving walkthroughs, right? So all these icons talk about that. So what happened in elicitation and collaboration in the previous knowledge area? At the start, the status of elicitation result was unconfirmed. And then when we confirmed the elicitation results, what we got was the results were confirmed. And we updated the status of elicitation results. That is the requirements or the designs. Okay. Now to update elicitation results status, we need to know the origin of the requirement, right? From where it was given, who is the owner, who need to be consulted, know where one requirement is related and has dependency with other. We know which solution component will fulfill that requirement, know which test cases will verify the functionality and what will help us in assessing changes to the requirement. So all this requires a kind of traceability somewhere, right? And a lot of other things. So as a business analyst, you need to know that you are supposed to trace the requirement, get them prioritized, and the requirement should be stored in a way that they can be reused across multiple streams or maybe can be reused in future also. You should be able to assess the requirements. Maybe, I mean, this is about the requirement should be clear, concise, and complete. Your requirement should be approved, and you should be able to allocate the requirements, such as this requirement will be, you know, will be delivered by this solution component. That requirement will be delivered by that solution component. You might require a stakeholder's name as to who will be impacted by the outcome of that requirement. So that's an allocation part. So requirements need to be maintained throughout the project life cycle. So this area, which is RLMC, we are talking about, it doesn't, uh, it's not a phase which ends somewhere in the middle. You need to follow this during the complete project life cycle. Even when you're doing the solution evaluation, you need to do the RLMC, right?
Yeah.
So we know what tracing requirement means, prioritizing, maintaining, and approving. So I'm not spending much time on this. Is
Okay.
that fine by you?
That's fine.
Yeah. Similarly, this guy BA needs to have a view of all these things when RLCM is happening, requirement lifecycle management is happening. Should be aware of the needs so that tracing, prioritizing, and maintaining could be done. Should know about the stakeholders who should be closely worked with. Should be able to maintain the requirements for reuse so the value is maintained. Should be able to support tracking and prioritization in order to get the context clear. Solution should be able to trace the requirements and designs to solution components. Should be able to evaluate requirements and designs from change management perspective. So this is not that important here. I'll just move on to tasks. So tasks are important. So what are the tasks? You should be able to trace, maintain, prioritize, assess any requirement changes, and approve the requirements. Get the requirements approved. So that's what it is.
That's through like a change management board, correct?
Which one you're talking about?
After
This
you've
one?
right, so you assess right the requirement changes.
Yeah.
Um, that has to does that have to go through a change control board like the or like a PMP?
So that is the process that you follow in order to get requirement change implemented, right? But before you actually submit that for approval to your steering committee, you actually need to do some analysis around that change. So this part is actually about the analysis wherein you need to assess the requirement changes. Is it really important? Is there an alternative solution that can be used? Is there anything else we can do rather than this requirement change? So all that assessment has to be there in requirement management lifecycle. It should not be that you immediately got something from stakeholder and you straight away added that as a new requirement, and then through change control process, which is more of a PMP concept, you started submitting those requirements. So that should not be the case. That's why this is required.
Okay.
So what do you need for all these tasks? We need the requirements and the designs that will fulfill those requirements. So that if you want to trace, maintain, prioritize, assess, and approve requirements, you will get an output of the requirements wherein the requirements are traced, maintained, and prioritized, and your design is also traced, maintained, and prioritized. So that's an important area.
Okay.
And then you have some more inputs, like requirements is the same, so just ignore this. BA information is required and proposed changes are also an input that goes to these tasks so that you have an output as, so this is same output that we discussed in the previous slide. This is something new. Requirements change assessment is there because you have assessed that whether this requirement is really a strong candidate to be a part of your business need. And then you have design change assessment also. So let's say you already had a requirement, but you designed a solution. But then after a while, you realize that this design is not fulfilling the business needs. So you might have to twist it a little bit. So that assessment has to go deeply into it rather than making sudden change. All right, so we have some more inputs. Again, same tasks. So this input is requirements are verified. So here the requirements were going unverified, but here the requirements were actually verified. So requirements verified means that they were clear, concise, and complete, and all of that thought has gone into. So it's the quality requirements that are taken here.
Okay.
So what happens is, so again, this is same that we had in previous. This is also same. And this is requirements approved and design approved. So once you have verified requirements, then only your requirements could be approved and design could be approved, right? So that's why they have listed down these various inputs on different slides. All right, so they will dig down deeper into each of these tasks, which is trace, maintain, prioritize, assess, approve. So let's have a look on traceability. So it has a straightforward purpose to ensure requirements and designs at different levels are aligned to one another, and you can manage the effects of change. So what do you need for the requirements to be traceable? You need requirements and designs because that is what you will trace forward or backward, and then you need trace requirements and trace designs. I mean that is what you will get as an output, right? So how do we get that? So there are two traceabilities. So there is a level wherein the requirement originated, and then it was a low level requirement, and then there was a high level requirement also. So you need to trace all of that from where the origin was there and what was the high level requirement. So this could be your business requirement, and low level could be your stakeholder requirement. That's all.
Okay.
All right. So here, this element that we are talking about is one requirement is derived from another requirement. So this is one element that the requirement is traceable on the basis of from where it is derived. There is another element of traceability, which means that one requirement is dependent on another requirement. Unless one is fulfilled, another cannot be fulfilled. So that is another traceability that you can highlight. You can also highlight that solution components are implemented. It is the solution component is considered to be implemented when this requirement is fulfilled. So you need to connect in your document, somehow you need to explicitly highlight that this requirement is going to be fulfilled when this solution component is implemented. So you might want to create some traceability. And then also the implementation of test cases. So here you are tracing the requirement back from test case to the actual requirement you have. So these are various levels of traceability, kinds of traceability. So what do you need to be able to trace? You need to have domain knowledge. You need to have information management approach that you created earlier in BA planning and monitoring. You need to have legal and regulatory information also, so that you can trace the requirements as per regulatory requirements. You need to have a requirement management tool or repository also. If you want to make your requirements traceable, there could be some tools that could come handy to you, and you can certainly use that. So what techniques would you use to trace requirements? There are certain business rules, uh, and you might need to analyze those business rules so that you can create a group of requirements which are affecting a particular system. And then you can functionally decompose requirements in order to come up with more detailed levels wherein you can connect those levels to various solution components that can fulfill those requirements. And then you have process modeling so that you can trace back the requirement that this requirement will actually fulfill the objective of this business unit and that business unit. Scope modeling, again, you might have various items under scope. So if you can model the scope, it would be helpful for you to trace the requirements to various scope items. That's how the traceability is expected. I think that's what we just discussed. Am I fine speed wise?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So tracing the requirement, who are the stakeholders? So it looks like everyone is there, right? We need to have an information of each one of these so that we can, we of course need the owners of the requirements, right? If a requirement is coming from domain SME or coming from implementation SME for solution component, operational support team, customers, testers, project manager, all of these. We need to know that who is the owner of requirements so that we can trace